Cyberpunk 2077 is a flawed game. Hot take of the year, I know. I'm not here to talk about the memes. I'm lucky enough that I got to play my first time through on a pretty nice PC and found the bugs little more than minor distractions. What I want to talk about is the writing, because I keep seeing articles about the story being lackluster or middling. Well, this hit me harder personally than any game I can remember, and I'm an old man who's been playing RPGs since the 90s. Maybe it's the isolation from COVID, and maybe it's the additional isolation of being in Seoul, but after a lot of thought, I think I've figured out why, and the answer is in how Carrie, River, and Judy's storylines end. Spoilers ahead for basically all of Cyberpunk 2077, but especially those three characters. First, let's look at the events of each of these final missions. River Ward's final mission, Following the River, comes after you first helped him partially solve the mystery of the former mayor's death and save his nephew from a serial killer. After those, he calls and invites you to dinner with his family. He's a cop when you first meet him. Common enough job for a sidekick in games like this, but here you help him cook jambalaya, then play an altered reality game with River's other niece and nephew, running around the trailer park they called home shooting bad guys. You get to eat with the family and afterwards climb up to have some drinks and talk about what comes next on top of the nearby water tower. By morning, normal life intrudes, and River has to fix the trailer's generator while hungover before going to check on the still extremely sick nephew that we rescued. We both had our little vacation, and now it's back to work. In Carrie Eurodyne's final mission, Boat Drinks, you meet him for a ride around the bay in what is presumably his yacht. When we met him, he was on the verge of suicide, holed up in his gilded cage of a mansion, completely disconnected from the world. After convincing him to play a reunion show and make nice with some young J-pop stars, he's reached an almost previously unthinkable level of chill. He plays a riff from a new song he's writing, his first new composition in a long time, while explaining in his own way that his life has reached the end of a cycle and it's time to become something else. The unfinished song he plays has this lazy, meandering calm that perfectly matches the feeling of sitting in a boat that you're not steering. Just listen.
That your song? Don't recognize it.
'Cause it's new. Riff's been bouncing around my skull for a while now.
At the end of this, you find out the boat actually belongs to an exec from his label, and his way of irrevocably cutting ties and forcing himself to step out of his gilded cage is to trash the ship and sink it. I guess if you want to burn metaphorical bridges, you could do worse than burning a literal boat. While this one ends on a pretty unambiguously upbeat note, none of the problems he brought up in the previous mission off the leash have really gone away. The difference is that he's confronting them now. Trashing the boat might have been cathartic for Carrie, but this isn't so much an ending as it is a new beginning. A new loop, as he'd say. Given the extra screen time Judy gets over the boys, it shouldn't be a surprise that Pyramid Song, her final mission, has the most going on. It's all at once an escape, fulfillment, and confrontation. Starting from the beginning, by the time she calls you for this mission, Judy has helped you plan a disastrous heist, rescued your mutual connection from a horrifying fate only to watch that friend commit suicide, taken revenge on the person who drove her to it, and finally hatched a plan to turn a dollhouse over to its employees and oust the gang that runs it. If you're not paying attention, it might seem a little out of place that she invites you to go diving far outside of the city, ostensibly to record a new kind of brain dance, a kind of all senses VR experience, that melds the experiences of two people together. It's easy to forget over the course of your exploits that this is what she actually does. She's a sort of cyberpunk version of an independent filmmaker. As you follow her into the lake, you discover that there's an entire town underwater here, and she reveals that it's the town where she grew up. It was flooded to make a reservoir, and this is the first time she's been back. She specifically wants to record your reaction to her reaction to seeing all of this again for the first time in this shape. You can actually hear some of her memories as you swim through the ruins she used to call home.
Hockey stick? Is there a skating rink here? I wish. Played street hockey on rollerblades.
Quit schmoozing, Alvarez. We're losing because of you. Connie! You're dead meat anyway. Will you go out with me? Sorry, you gotta go. They're calling.
Once you're back on shore and things are winding down, you hear her remembering her warnings to Evelyn, the ones that Evelyn ignored because you and she are still connected.
Speaking of harm's way, you know what I see living walking, talking corpses.
Power's up.
You go that way, the city will open, so be careful.
Movies? What was that? Couldn't hear you clearly. Something the matter? No, nothing.
It's only here that we learn that her last plan, the one that we thought succeeded, blew up in her face too. Judy's comment from earlier about Night City was prophetic, and in the morning, we learned this probably really is goodbye. She'd made the decision to leave the city before she even called. Before I get into the analysis, I want to tell you a little story. It'll make sense, I promise. Way back in 2004, my life was a train wreck, and on my 25th birthday, I got a few friends to drive with me 2.5 hours from Maine down to Providence, Rhode Island to see a gig. The picture you're looking at now was taken on a shitty instant camera the morning after. This trip didn't fix anything for any of us, but it was a little island of calm, a temporary escape and indulgence in something that we all loved doing. I'll come back to this. Now, Cyberpunk is far from the first game to give us non-combat ending missions with our companions. BioWare games pretty consistently give us these kinds of moments, as do really tons of modern RPGs. But there's something different about these, or two things, really. First, none of these missions are about V. Usually these kinds of things are about the friendship you've built or a sort of rehash about how far you've come, and yeah, there's a bit of that. But really, in all three of these, you're being invited to witness. In Judy's case, it's even extremely explicit.
Why does this stand to be perfect?
Hoping you'll be able to pick up all the unfiltered mess of emotions this place brings out in me. Like it or not, you'll react to those feelings. That's what I want to capture.
These felt like those times when a friend calls because they know they've reached an important crossroads and they don't want to experience it alone. River's reconnecting with his family and walking away from seeing the NCPD as the answer to his savior complex. Carrie's finally stepping out of Johnny's shadow, and Judy's determined both to leave Night City and to finally make time to do the things she loves. Understanding that is another thing that made me love these characters so much. Everything you do leading up to these missions are things they feel they have to do, never what they want to do. There's this pervasive tension between who they are, or at least want to be, and what this world forces them to do. This is most obvious with Judy, who's very, very much a helper. If we snoop on her email, we learn that Evelyn went to her for help with the heist, even after they hadn't been in contact for some time. Ev knew she wouldn't be able to refuse. We overhear her talking to her boss at Lizzie's about how she keeps sending girls there for help.
Stop telling every Joy Toy you meet to come here. The hell I'm supposed to do with them all?
I don't. Must be our rep. Girls need help, they come here.
Last time I checked, we weren't running a shelter.
Come on, they all deserve a chance. Any one could end up useful.
Even after Evelyn takes her own life, her first impulse isn't revenge, although that does happen. It's to help everyone else left behind at Clouds. We get little drips of what she'd rather be doing throughout, but Pyramid Song is a reminder that this, finally, is who she is. The Judy we've come to know, this avenging angel, is the one the world forces her to be. Well, here we see what she would be if she had her choice, a diver and an experimental artist. It's similar with Carrie, although in a different way. His insecurities have him constantly comparing himself to others, both with his relationship with Johnny and his reaction to the J-pop group Uscracks. He's also trapped by what he sees as his obligation. He can work with the corporations he hates or be irrelevant.
You try to get out of that deal with the label?
Let's be real. Say I break contract. Then what? Who's gonna release my new tracks? Who's gonna deal with distribution, promotion, influencers, media? Labels have got them all in their pockets. You're out with them, you're out, period.
You'd be free.
Seriously? Free to sing until you're blue in the face, nobody hearing a thing? It's just another kind of cage.
That he's ultimately able to break from this is more a result of him being in a position to weather the consequences better than our other friends. Even River, who doesn't get nearly as much time to develop as the others, has felt the obligation to be what he became because of witnessing and being very nearly forced to participate in his parents' murder at a young age. This is more speculation than the others, but I get the sense he'd be happiest cooking and helping his sister raise those kids. He worked as a cop and ultimately decided to move on to PI work because he still thinks people need protecting, and well, in this world, it's hard to say that he's wrong. This brings me to the second big difference between these missions and their analogs in other games. They're not endings. Usually with this sort of thing, we might see this character in a little side quest that resolves their personal story leading up to a big final battle. They'll play a role ranging from minor to pivotal, and it'll all tie neatly back together. And look, I love those moments, and I don't mean to take anything away from them. The Battle of Kaer Morhen in The Witcher 3 is one of my favorite moments in any game for this exact reason, along with similar confluence moments in the Mass Effect series and even older style RPGs like the Baldur's Gate style games. The reason I don't include Panam Palmer in this list is precisely because her arc conforms to this model. Look, Panam's great.
Panam, what are you doing? That's how you do it.
She's great. Just great.
Act 2!
Stop it! Fuck! Just shut up already!
At the same time, her final story mission is test driving a tank and murdering about 50 people with it, and she's the only one of these characters you can take with you on the final mission, leading a ragtag band of outlaws from the pilot seat of that tank against the most powerful corporation on the planet. It is immensely satisfying, but in a way that we've seen dozens of times before. What makes the other three missions so different is that they're emphatically not victory laps. And they're not endings for the characters, but they are your ending with them, setting aside the romance options for now. River's about to try to build a detective agency that does the right thing in a city where the cops are often worse than the gangs, and at the same time, the kid you and he rescued has a long road to recovery. Carrie's torched his professional contacts and is going to try to go it alone as a musician, which is more daunting than it might seem given the reach and power of the corporations in this world. You're not going to be around for this, for any of it. Judy's already made the decision to leave the city when she calls to invite you to the lake. Everything she's tried to do to make things better has blown up in her face. She couldn't save Evelyn, she couldn't convince the Mox to help more girls, and she couldn't dig the gangs out of clouds. She's come to the realization that she can either become someone she hates or die here. Even so, she's come to trust V, at least, and wants to share something beautiful, make something beautiful, before she goes. It's these things that made these missions, but I'll be honest, especially Judy's for me, feel so personal. To go back to my story from earlier for a second, two of these friends would be out of my life by the end of 2005, and the other only another year after that. Either they or I moved away or got caught up in our own trials and problems. Our time together was always temporary, and none of us were ever going to fix all of the other's problems. It doesn't make those moments any less beautiful or meaningful or memorable, and if anything, makes them more so. Each of us affect and hopefully improve in some way the lives of the people we come into contact with, and as we or they move on, we carry that with us. And ultimately, that's what these felt like. They felt to me like saying goodbye to friends who have to go their separate ways, but still holding close the time that you did get to spend together, time that you helped each other, however limited it might have been. You've become the first person Judy trusts to share her feelings with raw, the person she quite literally wants to go home with. You're the outsider that River trusts with his family, and you're the person Carrie wants to begin his new loop next to. You won't be there to see what happens, just as they won't be there when you have to face Mikoshi, ultimately alone. Nothing I've experienced in a game compares to this in terms of how, at least for me, this emulates the paths real friendships take. I've had dozens of friends over my life, some for punctuated moments and some for decades. Some I've lost and found again, and others lost forever. But I know I carry them with me, and I hope they feel the same. And that's the impression that Cyberpunk left with me above everything else. You've made things better, or made them at least possible, without just fixing everything. They've done what they can for you, too, all of them. We're all a bit broken, and we could all use a bit of help sometimes, but we also have to walk alone sometimes, too. And we have to let others do the same. And we'll make mistakes, misjudge and prejudge, and hopefully get a bit better.
Ugh. Can be such a gonk sometimes.
Yeah, me too, Judy. All of us. Thanks for watching this. If you've made it all the way to the end, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if this is going to be a thing that I do regularly, but if you enjoyed it, leave a like, and who knows, maybe I'll do some other kinds of character or writing analysis videos. Take care of each other, everyone.